Hello and welcome, everybody. We'll just give a minute for everyone to join, but we're so glad that you've joined us today. Excellent. So we'll go ahead and get started. And just want to wish everyone a very happy New Year. I know we're midway through the month, but we can still wish each other a New Year. We are delighted that you've joined us today for the Cross Country Consulting's Coupa R41 webinar and Lunch and Learn. Today, we are excited to share some of the key release highlights, the impacts, as well as some of Cross Country's release management offerings to you. Our goal out of today is to ensure that you gain the maximum value from Coupa Release 41. It is a big one. We are going to be highlighting some key areas, but there are additional highlights that we will share with you. If you're not already familiar with our release management guide, we'll be sending that out after the presentation as well. So this is a deeper dive out of today. Just as a participant today, you might have noticed, but your audio is muted. It will remain muted throughout the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and use our chat, our QA chat option, which is available to you. We will be answering questions during the presentation, and we also expect to have a few minutes at the end to answer any additional questions. Our objectives today are to identify some key release R41 updates that relate to procurement, invoicing, Coupa Pay, SIM, the overall platform, as well as the mobile interface. And we want to recognize and understand some key impacts from this release. We will also share some of Cross Country's release management offerings to you, and these are helpful to be aware of throughout the year and ensuring that you're getting the ample support you need. Lastly, your Coupa Sandbox should already be running on Release 41, and many individuals we recognize can learn better as they're following along. So please feel free to open up your Sandbox environment and follow along with us today. My name is Anna Doppel, and I am joined today with Chelsea Gregory and Joni Swoop, two experts within our cross-country delivery and post-production team. And individually as well as combined, we have provided many implementations, some of you to you who are joining today, and continue to provide support through our post-production team. Just a brief overview of our agenda. We've already concluded our introduction essentially, but we'll continue into our cross-country release offerings, look at some key release updates and impacts, and we'll wrap up the day with a question and answer session. Before we get started, we do have a polling question we wanted to gather from you, and really just so that we have an understanding of where you're coming from with regards to this release. So when was the last time your organization conducted a health check or regression testing? And there is no right answer. Just try and answer as most appropriate to your organization. And we'll just give everyone a moment to answer, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll and move on. Excellent. Thank you all so much. We're not going to go over those results, but that was the results of our question. So we'll go ahead and continue on. And let me move the slide forward. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Chelsea, who is going to give you a brief overview of some of the offerings that we do provide through our post-production support and release management teams.
Thanks, Anna. So our first slide here shows an overview of our PPS offerings. PPS is our post-production services group, and you can see in the blue ring here, these are the different products that we have PPS support for. So of course, you are all here today for Coupa, but in addition to Coupa, we have NetSuite, UiPath, Alteryx, and Intact. And then you can see noted in the black text around your circle some of the different functional areas that PPS can support you on. So anything from optimizing your processes, taking a look at your operational accounting and how that can be better streamlined, all the way to risk and compliance, as well as privacy and technology risk as well. So all of these things sort of work hand in hand to provide you with that PPS offering. I think we can head to the next slide, Anna. And here drills down a bit more into Coupa specifically. You can see in the blue ring, those are the main areas of Coupa that we see most frequently: procure to pay, supplier enablement, release management, and health checks. But of course, PPS can support all modules that you have. Those are really just the core areas that we see most frequently and support our clients on. And then you can see additional details in the black text around your blue ring. Anything from supplier training, I know that is something that I hear quite frequently, getting both our customers and our customer suppliers onto the CSP and using it to invoice and reply to information requests. In addition to that, we could always look at your different functional areas, so procurement and AP, recommend best practices there, as well as overall team training, which I believe Anna will talk about in a minute. So really making sure that you feel confident when you're using Coupa and are making the most out of your Coupa product. This expands upon our Coupa PPS offerings a bit more. On the left-hand side, the administrative services sort of echo what we've seen on those previous slides. But what I really like about this slide is it mentions a knowledge transfer. So, we are your partners in using Coupa. So we can do it all for you, be your admin, and we can also work with you in more of like a training one-on-one basis to ensure that you all have the knowledge of your system and how to use it as well. Couple quick metrics at the bottom there. Currently have over 200 PPS clients and 30 team members worldwide, as well as 85 countries supported and over 800 tickets processed monthly. One thing I did want to add here, and I don't know if I mentioned it on the previous slide, but in addition to the ongoing support of Coupa and your processes, PPS is also available for any special projects you may have. So maybe you're overhauling your chart of accounts or redoing your SIM process from start to finish. PPS is also available for those sort of special projects if you want to have a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Structured project to take on whatever you may be looking to do. I think that's it. Oh, and now the release management offering at cross country. So there are sort of 5 different areas where we can assist with release management. First is our release reference guide, which you all, I believe, should have received. These are our initial notes following each release, telling you what to expect. Number 2 is your release webinars. So you're all here, you can check that off. We do host these for every release to give you an overview of what's coming. Third are your system health checks. So if you've been live on Coupa for a while, maybe you're getting feedback from users, or you just aren't sure that you're using the system to its full potential, so to speak. PPS can come in and review your system, meet with your users, see what the pain points are, and then see how we can resolve that and ensure you're making the best use of Coupa. 4 is regression testing. So following each release, PBS is available to go through regression tests to ensure that the release has not impacted your instance in any negative way, or if there's a change of some sort that needs to be addressed. And finally, our release impact assessment. So if you are a PPS client, we can conduct these for you with each release. And there is a scale of release assessments, which we'll take a look at on the next slide. But this is really where we apply, or we look at the feature updates and through the lens of your own instance and determine the impact of each of those updates. Next slide, please. And this is just drilling down a little bit more into sort of the different levels or effort, that's the word I'm looking for, different levels or levels of effort for release management. So I just talked a little bit about the high level impact assessment, where we take a look at Coupa's future impact list and apply it to your instance and point out those features that may require testing or that you can turn on and off. And then there's also our full scale impact assessment. So once we've sort of reviewed all the features, taking a look at your test cases if you have them, and ensuring that we're testing end to end and that there are no negative impacts of the release. And then finally, new feature assessment. So this is if you want to take a look at a specific feature within R41. We can work with you on testing, developing, updating roles, or anything of that nature.
Excellent. Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone, so especially with that question that we initiated at the beginning of this presentation, if you have not experienced a health check or regression testing really since the last release, which was in September, August timeframe, so beyond that 4-month period, or you're just not aware, coming out of today, if you do want some additional support in those areas, as Chelsea shared, we can definitely provide that for you. So one other area that Chelsea mentioned we do offer is training as a service. This has been a really exciting and well-received offering, somewhat new to 2024. I think we've had a full year at this point, but we do offer role-based certifications as well as custom curriculum for training opportunities. I think it's really important to mention this since it's the beginning of the year. You might have experienced some turnover, you might have some new employees, or just changing in roles. And so we can offer an extension to you, whether that needs to be someone who needs to be certified, their new admin, or if there's some additional custom training that your team might need. Our role-based certifications, we have 3 different categories essentially for those, and we do run those on an ongoing monthly basis. We also can offer them on demand. So if there's a specific date or you want to have someone come on site or support kind of a larger effort with training, we can certainly do that. But our scheduled sessions for the procure to invoice, so the full system admin certification, those are every month. We have our next one coming up in February and then March. And then we have certifications for specifically procurement management and reporting, as well as invoice management and reporting. And those are also coming up in February and March. And we will continue to post the new dates on our website, so you can take a look at that as well. Definitely reach out to us if we can support you with any training or certification offerings. With that, we're going to dive into our key release highlights. So I'm going to turn this over. Oh, actually, we do have a question first. Sorry. We'll ask this question first. I know there's a lot of answers here. Feel free to indicate as many as you'd like, but which post-production support service or PPS service would you be interested in learning more about or implementing in the future? Again, we'll just wait a moment, and this just helps us kind of gauge the interest of our audience and how we can maybe support you in the future as well. No right answers, and again, you can select as many as you would like. All right. We will just wait another moment for those to finish, and then we will dive into our key release highlights, which I know you're all very excited to hear. Excellent. And I'm going to turn this over to Joni to kick us off with the highlights.
Joni, you're on mute, my dear.
Thank you. Hey everyone, we're going to talk first about the wave structure of how releases work, and then we're going to look at the key releases in detail. So as Anna mentioned, all sandbox environments should be on the new release. The next wave to go live with release 41 in production environment will be wave 1 on the 17th. So just 2 days from now, you've got some time to poke around. The final wave will be on the 7th. And we have a list here of the supported browsers for the January R41 release. And this will be available for your reference later. For our first set of key impacts, I want to take a pause here and talk about how these slides are structured for your review. It'll make it easier when you're coming back later. We'll have 1 to 2 key impacts per slide. We'll mark whether it's one of our favorite impacts. And at the bottom of each impact, you'll see whether that feature is on by default, whether a role or permission is impacted, and whether your integrations are potentially impacted. Quick reminder that if your roles and permissions are impacted, a standard role will be automatically updated with this release. Any custom roles will need to be manually updated with this release, and the specific permissions required will be listed on the Coupa Compass article that accompanies this update. And with that, we're going to start looking through our key impacts, the first of which is one of my favorites. If you've ever tried to send out emails in bulk from Coupa and got a ton of bounced emails back, and you've gone to look, say, hey, why is this not working? You'll have to click into each one and see why it's not working. With this update, you can both unblock these emails in bulk, but you can also see in the data table why the email bounced, whether it was rejected as spam by the receiver or if it was some other issue behind the scenes. And you can see that all in the data table without having to click into each of these notifications. So you're able to do that much more efficiently with a lot more data visibility. Another feature that will be new is this improved data management for form responses. You'll see on the form responses custom view screen. This experience will be much closer to how you create forms in, say, the SIM form builder, where each of the columns is searchable and you don't have to visually scan down the list. You'll also be able to move columns up and down and, of course, left to right much more easily. Both of these features are on by default, and only the enhanced management for email addresses requires a role update. Our next 2 impacts are related to the sandbox data sanitization. If you have need of refresh for your sandbox instance, which is common if you are launching a new phase of a Coupa implementation, or you've got a ton of test data that you would like overwritten with your current production information, you will have seen that when you initiate that refresh in the past, all of your emails and whatnot are going to be sanitized just across the board, which means all of your users lose access to the test environment upon that refresh. With this update, you have the choice to either include the emails in the sanitization effort or leave them out and leave them unsanitized, which gives you a little bit more control over access to Sandbox after your refresh. There are another few quick enhancements for the process automator. You now have 50 triggers available instead of 10, which means you have a lot more room to automate your processes. And the auditor role has been enhanced with a couple user-friendly features. For example, the invoices and purchase orders are now linked by default, which means there's a little bit less offline data transformation that's required to match documents. Both of these features are on by default. And then our final platform enhancement is one of my favorites. Did not mark it, but it is one of my favorites. The Coupa Navi AI agent is really interesting and can be very helpful to guide your users when they're new or when changes have been made. Navi has been enhanced with the ability to answer your questions more accurately and is able to ask clarifying questions. Also, with the increased usage over time, it's able to handle more languages. The best experience is still in English. However, it is improving greatly in terms of using the other languages that Coupa is able to be translated into. So if you have Navi activated in your instance, you'll see a huge increase and improvement in the user friendliness and accuracy of this tool. All right. And then one of my favorite parts of Coupa is the Coupa supplier portal. It lets your suppliers, of course, come in and use e-invoicing and other features to work with you directly. The updates to the CSP are largely cosmetic. However, they make the experience much more user-friendly and streamlined. The CSP business profile is the new name for the legal entities page, which is much more it's much easier to understand for suppliers that are new to the CSP. The table and creation, legal entity creation tool on this page are also easier to navigate, are now searchable, and you can edit things directly from this page. The payment methods are the new name for the remit to screen as well, which means it's a little bit easier to understand why you're going to the remit to and why you may have more than one. Suppliers will still be prompted to go directly to payment methods or the business profile upon their first login. But this is a much more user-friendly experience for your suppliers. I think with that, we're going to kick it over to Chelsea for her favorites.
Yes, we had a lot of fun marking our favorites in this release. So I'll start with Anna's favorite, which is incorporating estimated taxes in purchase orders and requisitions. I know Anna picked this because this is something that we frequently hear customers ask about. We've even seen some who are adding taxes via a specific line, and that is no longer required with this update. So with the incorporated estimated taxes, you enable it by chart of accounts. So if you want to enable it, for instance, for an international location, but not the US, you are able to do that as long as your chart of accounts are set up in that manner. And then you can select taxes to expand your tax information, add additional tax lines, and they're filtered by country and will display country-specific fields. That information is flipped when the requisition turns into a PO. And something that I really like is that you can now create approval chains based on estimated taxes. So you have the ability to potentially bring in someone in AP or one of your accounting folks when users are adding taxes or basing other approval chains around that. You can also create processes using Process Automator here, which they can calculate your estimated taxes, and you can also configure a tax engine callout in Process Automator to really fully automate that. So there are a couple of different ways or different levels that you could go with this, depending on your particular requirements and how you're operating. On the right-hand side of this slide, we have enhanced bulk editing for multi-line management. So if you use this feature up until this release, it's typically a checkbox and all of the editable fields will pop up and then you can make your changes. The two main differences in this release is now you can select a field. So not all fields will pop up. You can simply select, supplier or supplier site. And make those changes. And then in addition to that, they've also expanded the fields that are available. So you can see on the bottom here, a new field, supplier, supplier site, and so forth. So previously, I believe there were only maybe 4 or 5 that you could edit in bulk. But with this update, you can now edit many more fields. All right, next we have the hide additional stores for a cleaner homepage. So some users have asked if they can hide these. These are sort of your punch out section on your homepage, and that is now enabled. So that is under company information. So if you want to sort of declutter your homepage or be really conscious about how you're directing your users to what suppliers, you are able to hide those now. If you want to hide a specific punch out, so you don't want to hide the entire additional stores area, but just a specific punch out, you can do that as well on the specific punch out setup. Previously, you were not able to do that. It was controlled by content groups only. So this really expands what you're able to do as far as punch outs and who has access. And then sort of on the flip side of that, your punch outs are now also better integrated into your search results. So when users shop, your catalog items will appear as well as your open buy enabled supplier items. So those punch out suppliers for which open buy is enabled, those items will pop up. But for your punch outs that you either don't have open buy turned on or they are not open buy compatible, Coupa will now display those additional store options below your item results. So sort of a reminder, if you don't see your item that you're looking for in the results, those additional punch outs are also available if you wanted to click out into them and see if that item is available there. All right, moving on to invoicing and invoice smash. On the left, you'll see simplified invoice tolerance messaging. I did not mark this as a favorite, but this is also one I'm very excited about. I am sure as Coupa admins, you have received a question from a user, what does this tolerance mean? There are typically a lot of numbers in there, and if they don't know what the specific tolerance is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to them. So you can see in the example provided, the tolerance message is a lot shorter and a lot more straightforward, really just to make Coupa a bit more user-friendly, and so your users can easily tell what tolerance is being flagged and why. Then we have Invoice Smash in Coupa Core. I'm excited about this one, you all. So if you are an Invoice Smash user, you know that you typically sort of click out into the Invoice Smash module. The UI is a bit different. With R41, Invoice Smash will now be integrated into Coupa Core. Invoices that have been smashed will appear as a draft in Coupa Core, and you no longer need to click out into that sort of separate module. This will definitely streamline things for your users, sort of keeping them in one screen versus having to go from Invoice Smash to Coupa Core to finish processing that invoice. They can now essentially stay on one page. This will not be on by default. You do need to submit a support ticket to turn this on. Based on the information that we have seen thus far, the classic Invoice Smash will be supported until early 2026. So if you aren't quite ready to make the switch yet, you do have a little bit of time. But of course, we encourage you to turn it on, check it out, because we do think it will be very beneficial. All right, moving right along to Coupa Pay. We also pinged our centers of excellence for their favorites here, and they've selected these two, and I can see why. So the first is manually complete your supplier virtual card invoice payments. So this is specifically for virtual card payments on invoice. Previously, if a supplier charged most of the card, they weren't going to use the full amount on the virtual card. That card would sort of stay in a payment in progress status. And typically a Coupa support ticket was needed to complete that payment successfully. Now you are able to do this on your own. You can manually complete the payment once you know that there will be no more charges or that invoice has been fully paid. In addition, you can now adjust the autocomplete payment threshold. So by default, it is set to 98.5%, which means that when your virtual card is 98.5% utilized, it will mark it as completed. So you can adjust that. 95, 99, whatever fits with your business and specifically those suppliers that you are paying via virtual card on invoice. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we have automated transition of positive pay files. So up until this point, if you needed to send a positive pay files for your checks to your bank, it was a manual process where you needed to download that file and then email it over to your bank. Now those files can be automatically sent via SFTP. So it does require some configuration and working with your bank to identify these specifics. But you are now able to connect, so those positive pay files will be sent automatically whenever you issue a check.
Awesome. And I'm going to pick up with ViewPost. So if you are using ViewPost in conjunction with Coupa Pay, and ViewPost is an outsourced method for sending digital checks to your suppliers, there are two enhancements that are specific to ViewPost. The first is they are now going to be, they're going to be offering a virtual card as an option for your suppliers instead of waiting for the physical check if they would like. And we'll look at that process in just a second. The other is that you have additional shipping methods available for those physical checks. Previously, those defaulted to USPS first class. You now have UPS and FedEx shipping options for ViewPost. Now, the new method or the updated method for offering virtual cards is that after your payment batch is released, Coupa will transmit the check data to ViewPost. The ViewPost will contact the payee of the check and offer a virtual card for optimization. Which means that they get paid faster and they don't have to worry about waiting to receive that check. If they agree, ViewPost will deposit the check to themselves and the payee will receive a virtual card for the same amount to then be able to access and charge that card. I do want to note that while this update is very exciting, it's not going to be included in this specific release for R41. It will be in a mini release to be delivered shortly after the primary wave of releases. But we love the option for your suppliers to get paid sooner and to have less paper checks floating around in the mail. Next up is one of my favorites. If you have ever needed to launch a new site for your business and you needed to upload a ton of supplier payment accounts at one time with your supplier site information included, you will remember that you have to do that one by one in the UI in a previous world. With this update, you can do that via bulk upload, which means that the process is much easier. You are not having to click your mouse thousands of times to get the same number of SPAs, your supplier payment accounts created. This bulk upload feature is going to save a ton of time and make sure your data is much cleaner. This will be on by default. And I do want to note that this is only available for creating new supplier payment accounts. Any existing supplier payment accounts that require site level information edits will not be available for CSV. We have requested that, but it is currently only for new. The other feature here is specific to our TransferMate customers. So if you are using TransferMate as part of your Coupa Pay implementation, which most, if not all, are, you have the opportunity now for Coupa to flag when you have a batch optimization opportunity. And what that means is that if you've got multiple payments to one recipient from the same bank account, or if you have payments that can be batched from same day to next day, you'll get that banner at the top of your page offering to optimize those and to merge those. And what that does is save you bank transfer fees in most cases, meaning that your suppliers get their payments faster in some cases, and you are paying less to transact with those suppliers out of the box. Both of these features are again on by default, no updates to roles permissions. Here's another one of my favorites. This is for user experience. In a previous world, you were able to put in submission blockers for expense reports that would block a expense report from being submitted if the data was incorrect or out of line with policy as you've configured it in your approval chains. However, you now have the ability to do a submission warning, meaning your user will have a soft block rather than a hard block and an opportunity to fix whatever is wrong before it goes into the system. What this does is it allows your approval process to continue more smoothly, and it decreases some frustration on the part of the end user if there is a exception to the policy or something that needs to go through anyway to be reviewed by your approvers. Another update to the expense and mobile feature is the ability to request a pre-approved virtual card in Coupa Mobile for your expenses. You were previously able to do this in the web version, but now your users are able to do this on the mobile version of Coupa. So they're able to request a virtual card to be pre-approved for an upcoming expense. And that means that their expenses are much more streamlined, and you're spending less time doing approvals after the fact. This feature is not on by default and will need to be requested via a ticket to Coupa support. There are also some updates to the roles and permissions, but they are pretty minor and listed more specifically in the Coupa Compass article. Um, Additional updates to the mobile experience include expanded open buy. So previously, only fully successful purchases would be included in the mobile version of open buy. So you would have had to have purchased something, it have gone through successfully for it to show, even if your supplier had it available for the first time purchase. This will now include search results from any of your suppliers who use API for open buy, with the caveat that your CXML suppliers will still not show in the mobile open buy without a successful purchase, but we are inching towards having a completely open buy for all. This does require an update to your app in order to use it, but your app store can make sure you can do that update from within your app store. Within risk aware, as a part of the SIM RPM module, there is a new set of criteria called the the Coupa Community Score, and that'll be on the supplier health page. It does default to 15% of your overall supplier health score, which you are able to configure if that is too high or too low, but it accounts for behavior with other customers that Coupa has. Coupa looks at the community behavior for that supplier, creates the score from several different transaction-based criteria, and then provides that back to you at an anonymized level. So it won't say like this supplier's reported this behavior or that supplier reported that behavior. But aggregate will report good and bad behavior within the Coupa community. I think that this is particularly helpful for customers who are expanding their supplier management functions within their procurement teams. Gives you a little bit more of like a temp check on how your suppliers are behaving outside of how they behave with you. And then we have one final set of key impacts here with SIM. One is the supplier search assistant results. That means that if you are requesting a new supplier, you can search within the Coupa community, and it will pre-populate certain data points with your new supplier request, including your name, primary contact, primary address, and any additional contacts up to 3. This is really helpful if you've got an internal user requesting a new supplier, but they don't actually have access to all of this information. We often see new supplier requests get stopped or delayed while your end user tries to find the right primary contact or the right primary address. And now with this feature, if that information exists with one of your supplier's other customers, your new supplier request can pre-populate it so you can validate the information rather than having to dig for it yourself. And then on the supplier side of SIM, your suppliers are able to manage multiple form responses within their CSP instance. It's still true that if you send the same form twice, the first one that you send will be overwritten by the second send. But if you have multiple types of requests out to the same supplier, they're able to view all of those in one data table and respond to them accordingly. And with that, we have wrapped up our key impacts. I'm going to kick it back over to Anna for our next poll question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So our last poll question actually of the day is just an understanding of which Coupa module are you interested in learning more about or implementing in the future? Some of them we covered today in our release updates, and they might not be a module that you're currently using, and you might be interested in now that you hear some of these features. So if you would like to select some modules that you might be interested in, some of them we did not cover any highlights on. Again, please refer to our release management guide, which was sent with our newsletter about a month ago, and we'll be sending it out as well. So we'll wait a few moments for those to indicate which modules you might be interested in learning more about. It could be even a module that you have and you just need to have an expanded session as far as training or just more information about this module itself to continue to make sure you're getting the value out of it. Excellent. We will continue to move forward into our impacts. And I believe that's staying with you, Joni. Is that correct?
Kicking it over to me.
Oh, great. Chelsea.
All right, so the next, I believe, 4 slides are around our key impacts, and these are some of the features that we've already noted, but these really are sort of what we believe to have the biggest impact on your day-to-day usage of Coupa, or those features that have been requested widely. So our first one is complete supplier virtual card invoice payments. That can be a tongue twister. So this was the feature where you can now complete those virtual card on invoice payments, even if the card is not charged to 100%. And you can do this manually or by setting that auto-complete payment threshold. Next slide. Perfect. This is our summary of Invoice Smash, and specifically Invoice Smash is now in Coupa Core. So again, you can transition to the new Invoice Smash in Core starting with this release, but you should transition prior to 2026. I'll also throw in a fun fact here. I was watching some of the Invoice Smash videos that Coupa has already posted, and per Coupa, they are referring to Invoice Smash in Core as Super Smash. So I'll be referring to it as Super Smash from now on. But we definitely want to get you using that prior to next January. This really is more of an overarching update. So several of the pages in Coupa are already modernized. They have a new look and feel, but Coupa is expanding this to additional pages and tables. So they will have a different look and feel than you may be used to. For now, you are able to toggle back and forth between the old, or what they're calling the classic experience, and the new, more modern experience. So you may see this as you're poking around Sandbox. And we do expect Coupa to continue to modernize the different pages with this new look in the coming releases. And I think next is our last one. Yes, so Joni had talked about this previously, but these are the updates to the CSP. So similar to your core Coupa product, Coupa is also modernizing the CSP, making some changes to the look and feel, but most importantly, they are renaming some items really to make the CSP more user-friendly for your suppliers. And again, your profile is being renamed to business profile. There will be a refreshed legal entities page, and the remit tos have been renamed as payment methods. In addition to that, I have seen in the CSP that the payment method types have also been renamed. So previously, you may have seen address as the selection for payment by check. Coupa is now streamlining those to update that to check payment to make it a little bit clearer for your suppliers. I think that's it.
Excellent. Yeah, we have come to the end of our content. So we hope we still have you here. We hope we've generated some excitement about this new release. There certainly are many more features that, again, we will be sharing with our release management guide as well as this deck. But if you do have any questions, you can start putting those into the chat, and we will also be having a few moments after I wrap up to answer some of those live if needed. So just a few key takeaways. We hope that you have learned more about some of the key features that are available in this new release, as well as noted some of the impacts that we're already seeing from the release in some of our clients' sandboxes and through our own investigation as well. If you do have any further assistance requests for release management, training, modules, any of that, we are here to help. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. After this session, you will be taken to a course evaluation, which will also be available to you as a follow-up. So just take a few moments, if you don't mind, to provide some feedback. We do read this feedback and is the driver for improvements with each one of our released webinars. So we really appreciate your taking the time to do so. Again, if you do need further support, whether that be with release management or just other areas that cross-country can support you with in your Coupa journey, if you are a new post-production customer, so you haven't already engaged with a post-production resource, you can reach out to Matt Kinsavage, and his email address is here and it will be available to you after the session. And if you're already an existing customer looking for additional support, you can submit a ticket into the request hub, the cross-country request hub, and you can specify release 41 or whatever your question is, and our team will certainly be there to support you. So with that, I will turn this over to questions. Luckily, we do have about 12 minutes left. We can certainly adjourn early, but we want to make sure any questions you have are being answered. So Joni, Chelsea, are there any questions in the chat? I'm not actually open to that module right now.
There are not any new questions at the moment.
Okay, so if you have any questions, go ahead and fill them in and put them into the chat, and we will certainly be happy to answer them live. If you don't feel comfortable, but you do have questions, again, please reach out to us afterwards, and we want to make sure that those are answered. We'll just wait a few more minutes. If you don't have any questions, you're free to go. And if you would like to stay on, you're welcome to as well. We'll stay on for a few more moments. All right. I think we can go ahead and conclude then and give you back a few moments to hopefully enjoy a few bites of lunch or breakfast, depending on where you are, maybe dinner. But we certainly appreciate you joining us today. And we, again, just hope that you have excitement with this release and are able to go forth and start experimenting and looking at the key features and impacts within your sandbox environment. For those of you who are on wave 1, you will start to experience this in your production environment starting on the 17th. So please go ahead and take some time, if you have not already, to review these, especially those that will be enabled by default, because those, again, won't require any action. Those will just happen automatically with this release. Excellent. Well, thank you all again.
Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all.